This is episode 158 of the Leadway Wealth Builders podcast with me, Chris Rickenbaugh, and I am using this podcast to document my journey in real estate and business while also talking a little bit about travel hacking and personal finance. Today's episode is going to be documenting how I'm using Subject 2 to buy my next house. So if you're interested in Subject 2 and how it works and what people's motivation would be to sell in this way, make sure you stay tuned for the whole episode here. But before we hop into that, go ahead and follow me on all the socials, Instagram and TikTok at chris.rickenbaugh. That's chris.REICHENBACH. And you can also listen to this podcast just about anywhere you listen to podcasts. I know a lot of people are on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It is available there, so make sure you're listening. And if you don't have any of those, you can go over to Amazon Music, YouTube, or Podbean to be able to listen. So let's hop into what the show is about today. And I covered that a little bit, but basically I'm going to be covering how I'm using Subject 2 to buy my next house. So for those who don't know what Subject 2 is, it is subject to the existing mortgage. So most of the ways people do this is taking over the payments of the house. So for an example, say somebody just purchased a house maybe a year or a couple months ago, and then they get relocated for work. So obviously, if they use a low down payment method like a VA loan or something conventional that's 3 to 5% down, they have no equity in the home. And if you're, trying to sell that home, now you're selling it for exactly what you bought it for, and you're going to end up coming to the closing table if you're able to sell it with money. And that's what nobody wants, because you just put down $10, $15, $20,000 to be able to buy this property. And now you're going to have to come out another, $10, $15, $20,000 to be able to sell it. So that's a problem. And that's a big reason why Subject 2 is able to be really, really strong in this market, because people are trying to sell at the peak market that it was, a year or two ago. And it's just not that way anymore. So they're expecting these super high prices, and that's just not what people are buying now. They want to be able to sell. The interest rates are too high. There's tons of situations. So being able to buy houses this way, kind of allows you to be a little bit more creative. And this is like the highlight of what Pace Morby does in seller financing. So this is the exact strategy that I'm using to be able to purchase this new home. And, it's a really good opportunity, because as an investor, you have to be in business for 2 years to be able to qualify for a loan. Now, I know there's ways around that. I'm just, I haven't ventured out enough to be able to figure out all of those different little details. But mainly I was told, hey, when you're an entrepreneur, you're basically going to be looking at seller financing or possibly Subject 2 to be able to purchase homes. And I knew that as an investor, that's probably the route I was going to have to go. And it would take in an ideal situation to where I was not going to have to bring really any money to the table at all and just be able to buy the house Subject 2. Now, that is extremely hard to do. For anybody making cold calls every day, they know how hard it is to be able to try and negotiate somebody down to zero. It's got to be the right situation. And that's what I ran into here, is because in one of the mastermind groups I'm in, I was talking about talking about a flip in an area. And I said, yeah, here's where I buy. And he said, somebody spoke up and said, hey, I actually have a house out in that area. Are you interested in it? And we're interested in selling Sub 2. I said, yeah, send it over. So learning a little bit more about the situation, I'm going to break that down here for you. So the situation is, the seller has had this home for about two to 3 years now, and they use the VA loan to be able to purchase the house. So on a VA loan, you're able to not come to the closing table with any money. Now you can fact check me on that, but you can pay 0% down to be able to purchase the house. And then what I learned is you can also wrap closing costs into the mortgage of the house. And so anybody who's gotten a mortgage, they understand that for those first however many years, it's like 10 to 15 years, you're really just paying interest and you're not really paying down the mortgage until later on in the loan term. So even in 2 to 3 years, what is owed on the house is exactly what they bought it for. So they have zero amount of equity. There's repairs that need to be done to the house that are about $15,000 to $20,000. And then the worst part of it is that they really can't rent it long term, or they're going to be underwater about, $500 to $600 a month. So their only solution would be to be able to do a medium term rental, which the numbers are still looking a little slim for that. But the only other way is a short term rental like an Airbnb, where, you could probably get about $1,500 to $2,000 a month. I know that's a wide range for all my Airbnb people, but having to be able to do that, it's just not super strong for an Airbnb, and especially with the location. So the only way this works is if, I was willing to eat it a little bit long term, or if I was looking for my own personal house, which I am. So with that being said, and I'm going to do an episode on this next week, but I'm going to be turning my primary home currently into a medium-term rental in another city about, 45 minutes to an hour away in a really good location. And this is what I purchased the home for, almost 2.5 years ago now. So coming up on 3 years, and this was the goal from the beginning. I checked my Airbnb numbers. I said, this house still works, and we're basically paying the same amount and to move into almost a 2 times bigger house. I think it's like 1.6 or 1.7 bigger. So it's like, we're looking to upgrade on space. We like the area. It's safe. We might as well move into this, and we're not going to really be eating it on the mortgage payment, because if we get this house rented on Airbnb, it's going to be able to cash flow super easy, even as a medium-term rental, and even more as a short-term rental. So it just makes sense to be able to move into this one, do a little bit of upgrades on our own, put a little sweat equity into the house, wait a couple years, and then kind of see where the market takes off from there, because it is a pretty hot area. It's a little bit sleepy and a little bit old, but, houses and lots are really going up for sale in that area. So we're expecting a lot of appreciation around the Charlotte market. So it just made sense. And how the subject to come into play here is that we're basically just we are just taking over the existing mortgage. We're not having to put really any money down into this house, and we're covering closing costs. So I think we're just reimbursing them the last month's mortgage, and then we're just taking care of closing costs. So that'll be, probably closer to $3,000 or $4,000 total to purchase the entire house. And we didn't have to use our credit, any bank statements, or anything. So that is the really, really cool part about Subject 2, is that, especially for us flippers, we're using a lot of credit. We have a lot of high credit lines, which impacts our credit score. So being able to use that to be able to get loans, we're not able to get really good loans until, later on, if we're building the business correctly. But in the beginning, it's really, really hard, because you're taking a little bit of a hit to your credit score, and everybody freaks out about it. But this is one of the ways to be able to purchase a home without having to use your own cash or your own credit. And that's why it's becoming so big, because there's tons of these situations out here. And it was something I did a lot of studying on before I actually started flipping houses, because I thought this is how I was going to make my money. But, it's really just turned into another tool in my tool belt, along with flipping houses, because I'm able to look at it from so many different situations and be able to put 2 and 2 together. And, once they give me all their information, I can present multiple options. And then this one was the best option to be able to purchase this house, to where, somebody just, hey, I want to be done with this. It's not going to cash flow. It's not going to cash flow at all. We got to put quite a bit of money into it to be able to even rent it out. We just want to be done and out of it. And that's where Subject 2 can come in, being able to just take over the mortgage, cover closing costs, and then be able to move right into that house. So that is how I'm using Subject 2 to buy my next house. And it's going to be a personal house, and being able to turn my current house into a medium-term rental, which I'm going to be talking about next week. But if you're still hanging around, make sure you tune in to Friday's episode 159. I'm going to be interviewing one of the loan officers on Lone Mountain Capital, which is a hard money lender here in the North Carolina market, and cover a few estates around. So make sure you tune into that. Jack's going to be able to give us really good nuggets in how Lone Mountain works and how they can help you and fund your deals as well. So make sure you tune in for that on Friday. But for this episode, this is all I have for you. So thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Leeway Wealth Builders podcast. I'll see you on the next one.